Great
How you
class. Thank
feeling?
you, Melissa.
You're welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Me too. That was such a nice way to start the day off.
Beautiful. Well, welcome everybody. This is my favorite part. I've been most excited to dive into this conversation because I love big talk. Anybody who knows me, if we've met, if we've had a chat, it's probably been intense. um, but yeah, I obviously it's Black History Month and it's my birthday, and there's all these emotions and things swirling around. And even in my own experience from last year, with the events around George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement gaining traction, I've had to navigate my own experience, not only as a Black person, but as a Black Canadian woman, a woman working in wellness, which is a predominantly white space. And thankfully, working in wellness is what brought me to have the opportunity to meet Shanique. So Shanique and I know each other through our relationship with Lululemon. And so I was thrilled when she agreed to be here because I have learned so much just in being a friend and being in friendship with Shanique and having conversation with her. And I'm just really excited to dive in and share a bit more about our own journeys and hopefully answer some questions if you have any, and just create a space where we can have a conversation because it's a lot to unpack. It's not a simple matter. It's very complex. It's very layered, and it's going to take time and conversation and open hearts and open minds to really dive in. So, Shanique, can you tell us a little bit about you and tell us about your work in diversity, equity, and inclusion? Because it's kind of a new journey for you as well, and it's really based on your own experience.
Totally. Yeah. Hi, everybody. It's so nice to see so many faces. I'm such an extrovert and I'm like so desperately missing humans.
They're all here.
This morning, my partner made a joke that I'm dating them so that I have an audience at all times. I'm just, they're like laughing in the background. I was just like doing a little skit for no one. And they're like, I think you just need an audience. So I in the pre-pandemic world, I was and I still am. I keep saying I was as if the pandemic means my job is gone forever. But I am a DJ and an event producer. I I organized a monthly event called Level Up, which was a queer BIPOC focused dance party. And as the pandemic sort of shifted, I have sort of led more into doing more consulting work around diversity inclusion. I recently started working with Cicely Blaine Consulting, which is now Bacau Consulting. They're doing a little rebrand, as Lucy knows. Hi, Lucy. Lucy's doing helping with the design, the rebrand stuff for Cicely Blaine Consulting. So I'm a diversity and inclusion educator and facilitator, and DJ and an event producer. And I'm stoked to be here and to be in conversation with you. Should I talk about more about the fund too, Melissa?
Yeah, that's where I was going to go next. So, part of your contribution and your donations are going to a project that was started by Shanique called Give Back to Black. So, yeah, dive in. I'll let you
Yeah.
tell us all about it.
So I got hired by a jewelry company to help them design their Black History Month like Instagram socials, and that like looked like helping them, like they wanted to do like a each week they focused on like a different like sort of like Black person thing. So it'd be like Black historical figures one week, and then another week it was like Black Instagram accounts you need to follow, or like our favorite content creators. And doing that work with them was so much fun that it gave me the idea to do something similar on my own socials, except for instead of taking it once a week, I took it way too far, and I decided that I'd post once a day for every day of Black History Month, just offer a different share, and then give people the option if they'd like to e-transfer me at Give Back to Black at gmail.com, and all of the money that I get. So I'm sharing, people are like compensating me for sharing if they've learned or gained anything from my posts. And then I'm going to use that money and redistribute it to Black folks in the community who want to access some of their self-care needs. I've been thinking a lot lately, just with how the pandemic has taken away so much financial security for me. Like my job was completely taken away just like that. So and there's so many things that I like to do for myself that make me feel good about myself, like going to counseling, going to RMT, like going to the dentist, getting my hair done. And those things are often so cost prohibitive. And I was just reflecting on how unfortunate it is that often the tools, there are tools that you can find within yourself that are free, but the reality of the situation is a lot of like things and like that make us feel good and about ourselves and allow us to care for ourselves are cost prohibitive. So I kind of combined my love for researching and learning new facts and then sharing the new facts with everyone with a desire to help raise money so that, Black folks are just deserving of financial compensation always and forever. So yeah, that's how it started. So I'm just posting on my socials every day about a different thing. Yesterday I shared this really cool person, a queer Black guy who is a wildlife educator, and he like incorporates Black History Month with wildlife, and it's so cool. And then another day I shared about the first Black woman to win an Olympic gold medal. And this weekend I'm really excited because I am going to talk about Black Cowboys.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm stoked.
interesting.
Yeah. Stay
Like
tuned.
Canadian Cowboys, like Alberta Cowboys, or
You wait.
oh yeah,
Well,
I'm gonna okay. Don't
spoiler
spoil it.
alert.
Don't spoil it.
Okay, I was going to spoil it. Basically, I'll just give you a small thing, which is that 1 out of 4 cowboys were actually Black. But when we see like the cowboy narrative in like movies or television, they're always white cowboys. I always felt like when people do like cowboy themed parties and I was there, I'd be like, this feels racist. But in actuality, a lot of cowboys were Black people.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love that. So that kind of brings me to one of the questions I wanted to ask you because uh, I think listening and learning has been like the name of the game for the past year when it comes to racial conversations. We hear a lot that we're all listening and learning, and what you're doing is amazing because you're providing information and an opportunity for people to learn as well, which is the first step. It's fundamental. But I guess my question is, where do you feel we go after listening and learning? Because it feels like we sometimes get stuck there, and it's fascinating to learn all this information and to read all the books. But like, what happens from there, in your opinion, and from your experience? What would you love to see happen beyond listening and learning?
I would love to see people, I don't know, like in June, I found that there was such a call, like a huge jump to like donate to Black charities and like support Black folks, but it's not sustainable long-term care. I'd love to see people figure out like, I don't know, there's a lot of really good reading that exists out there about reparations and why Black folks are owed reparations. Like, yeah, just I'm doing a lot of educating this month, but I'm going to just prompt Google that. If you're unclear as to why Black folks are deserving of reparations. But I would love to see folks make a long-term like goal to donating to Black organizations, paying Black people for their work, whether that looks like, off every paycheck I give X amount back into my community. I think that's super important. I feel like, yeah, Melissa, we've talked about how much like financial, I don't know, like unfortunately we live in a world under capitalism, so like support, like giving up wealth and redistributing wealth is important. Another
Yeah.
thing I would like to see is like beyond just financial is I guess action. Like I think it's really important to learn and listen, but if you can't put those things you've learned into action in the form of like having difficult conversations with your family, having difficult conversations with your partner, having difficult conversations with your friends, and actually speaking up in moments where like typically a Black person has to either sit there and be really uncomfortable or like take the risk to their safety of speaking up in a situation that doesn't feel safe for them. I feel like that really should become the work of non-Black people, to be vocal. Like, asking your work, like, what are we doing for Black History Month this year? Like asking them like way in advance, like, what are we doing? How are we supporting? Like, yeah, stuff like that.
Why do you feel like, and I mean, obviously we're kind of just guessing, and maybe you guys can share in the chat box if you've had this experience, like, what is it that makes it uncomfortable to have these conversations? As a white person, do you feel uncomfortable advocating for Black folks? Like, there's a bit of I remember overhearing this conversation about like, and I know, Shanique, we've talked about it, how we're asking employers to make space for Black folks. And they're like, well, there just aren't anybody. There just isn't anyone qualified, or we looked, we tried. And so how do we sort of, within these networks, create opportunities for people of color on both sides of the fence? Like, we need access to education and training and all of those things so that we're qualified for these roles. But I do feel like there's a part of the discussion missing around how do our allies create spaces for us. Like, one example is influencer culture. And I know Farina's here. Me and Farina have had this conversation. Influencer culture is inherently racist. It like props up white supremacy in terms of like the idea that white is more knowledgeable, more respected, has a better reputation, and therefore we feel this desire to have a white influencer represent our products or our ideas or our creativity. I know I've definitely fallen into that with Kunye and the products. So yeah, I guess, what are your thoughts on like, how do we invite allies to make more space for us, knowing that we also have responsibility to excel and be good and train ourselves for these roles? But yeah, does that make sense? I think I asked you like 3 questions in there.
Yeah, ask me one.
Yeah. So what do you think the responsibility is, or the action that can be taken from allies in these spaces in order to create more space for Black folks, whether it's like a work environment or a wellness environment?
I feel, what action? Or like how, like, for if there's someone who's like, okay, that all sounds great, but what do I do? Like that sort of thing.
Yeah, like I remember a story a while ago. I can't remember what company it is, but like the CEO stepped down to make
Yeah.
space for that role for a Black person, you know?
Oh,
So like,
yeah.
are there actions that we can,
I
yeah,
get what
we
you're
can
saying. And like,
take those
I
people?
guess for some people, like, it might be scary to like go to your CEO and like you might risk like losing your job or something. Yeah, that's a hard one. I guess I would, if it was me, if I was white, I would I think I would try to like, I was gonna say I'd plan a coup. I'd get I'd slowly rally people on my team one by one, like a communist revolution in my workplace to overthrow my my CEO. I'd like, I feel like if you just go with just you to like and bring up a grievance, that's a lot harder than like getting other people on your team or on your side and being like, I mean, I don't know. If you're having a hard time getting people at your work on a side of like feeling like Black people have inherent worth, I'm like, your coworkers are pretty fucked. And I don't know what to tell you. But I guess, yeah, I would try to like, educate the people around me, share resources at work, share resources in whatever circles you're in, and then hopefully get a collective or a team of people to bring that to upper management.
Yeah. Well, I would love to hear from the community if you're comfortable sharing. Like, what actions do you feel are challenging to take in the workplace? What resistance do you meet up against or do you face? Because I'm curious from both sides. And I know we're joking, like, what would I do if I were white? But I think it's a really important seat to take on both sides of the story. We often like, we leave out humanity in the discussions around race, but the reality is we're talking about, as another human being, how would I feel in this position? And I think that's a key element in how do we actually move intentionally and take intentional action. I did an interview yesterday, And one of the interview questions was like, why is it important for white people in wellness to create safe spaces for Black people, or to invite safety when welcoming bodies of color? And I was like, because we're all human. And that like conversation or that aspect tends to be removed. It's all like strategic. We have to listen, we have to learn, we have to put strategy in place, we have to activate, like, but what about just the humanity of it? So I think it's important on both sides to be like, if I were white, what would I want to do? Because you can speak from the place of what you would want to see as a Black person, and vice versa, right? So I think it just brings us back to our humanity, even though we joke. But yeah, maybe Black people do want to see a coup, and maybe there's a white person courageous enough to lead one. Like, who knows? But we don't know unless we have these honest conversations about it. I also just wanted to say, if at any time anyone has a question or anything, go ahead and pop it in the chat box, and we'll refer back to it. So just let me know. So Shanique, I also wanted to ask you if you could share your experience around any environment or situation where you've been the only Black person in that experience. And if you can kind of describe, again, just reminding us of your humanity, just describing the experience of being the only person of color in a white space, whether it was through work or wellness or recreation. Um, yeah, can you think of a time in particular that like resonated with you, where you were hyper aware that you were the only person of color in the space?
Yeah, I think a lot, less so. I think a lot towards the beginning of when I started DJing, I felt that way, and a lot of, like, even just in that, a lot of DJs were male and white. So I was definitely hyper aware in that situation that I was sort of like the only woman DJ and the only Black woman DJ. I think especially when in spaces where like Black music and culture is so mainstream culture now, and it's pop culture. So there's something that's very interesting about existing in a space where you're surrounded by people who are playing Black music and like celebrating Black music, but not actually making that connection between like, oh, and I have to actually be nice to the Black person in front of me. That
Mm.
disconnect's very odd sometimes. Like, I
Do you,
think that oftentimes we consume culture without actually thinking about who created the culture.
that's what I was just going to say. I was like, do you think it's conscious? Do you think they really recognize the dichotomy that's happening
No,
there? Or, yeah.
yeah, but
So maybe that's also like an actionable step, is just to be conscious. And I don't think it's just with Black culture. Like I see it happening, especially in the beauty world, like gua sha. Okay, this is a little bit of a tangent, but like the lack of respect to the history around gua sha and how it's just like exploded into this beauty trend. We are all like consuming it without really paying homage to where it came from or having discussions around where it came from. It's now just a beauty tool when that wasn't the original intention, right? And so I see it happening in Black culture all the time. It's like, now it's just a hairstyle, but for us it was like we had to do that to protect our hair. And there's like a whole story around how certain elements come to be, but once a white person adopts it and it takes off, then it's like we're only talking about it as this trend or in this one plot or storyline. So yeah, I think it's really fascinating through music, your experience of witnessing that in that environment and that experience.
yeah, totally.
Yeah. So, yeah, I guess.
Like, it's your birthday, and I want to ask you a question now.
Oh, okay. Sure.
What should I ask Melissa, everyone? What is one thing that you're looking forward to in your next year of life?
Oh, that is a great question.
Or
You
what
know
is one
what?
thing you're trying to cultivate in the next year of your life?
Oh, more presence. Definitely more presence. I experienced a lot this year outside the pandemic. And if you're subscribed to the newsletters, you know bits and pieces. But I mean, yeah, it's been a wild, wild, wild year. And so for me, I just want to be present. I want to feel my way through um, my 34th time around the sun. because I think it's so easy to get like swept up and caught up, especially in the things that are happening around us. So to be present in my own experience in my life, my own experience in my body, my own experience in my work, I would say that's definitely one thing I want to cultivate in my 34th year. Yeah, and other than that, I'm really looking forward to aging. Um, I like wrote a note in my journal that I'm like, I'm pretty sure 34 is the year I stopped giving a fuck. Like, which is like, I just feel more at ease all of the sudden. So I think there's that like magic number for everybody. And I feel like mine has just arrived. So just settling into my skin, settling into my life. I'm really looking forward to that.
I like that.
Yeah,
Very good place to be at, I feel like.
I think so too. I think there's a question here.
Oh yeah.
Let's see.
Right. There's
Okay.
like no stress to answer this now. I just wanted to throw it out there because it's been something I've been needing some
Yeah,
guidance.
no, this is why we're here. So what can training look like in a non-traditional sense to bring people of color into an industry where there are few? For example, I work in film. There is not enough Black representation in the industry, but the positions require training and credits. Can you suggest a way to bring people into the industry who may be keen but don't have the training and are beyond the place in their life where they can do a co-op?
I don't know. I've seen things for like what am I trying to think of? I just saw this thing online. I don't remember what it was for, but it was basically like um oh, this is what it was. It was for grant writing. And it was like maybe not exactly connected to this, but it was like a lot of people who are getting funding to do their projects are people, who aren't people of color. Like how kind of like this situation, or like how do we teach people this, like how do we make this a more diverse pool of people that we're choosing from when people don't have these skill sets. And it was what the solution to that with this example was that they had created like a training or an info session specifically for that group of people, so that, or I saw another thing actually with sommeliers, because it was like saying that the wine world was really like white, and it was like a sommelier scholarship for Black folks to learn said skill at like a reduced rate or free even maybe. So I've been seeing things like that come up. And another thing that I would think of is if you know someone Black in those industries and like funding exists somehow, I would be like, hey, I want to support you if this is anything you have an interest in at all. Totally no pressure. Actually, maybe I don't know. Like, I wonder if there's a way to pay Black folks in these positions to like share the knowledge or learning that they have found in that industry with other Black folks to make them feel welcome in those spaces. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. I think as well, yeah, it definitely makes sense. I've actually come across similar questions like this recently, and I think it's a really great opportunity to understand at a deeper level how systemic racism is. So I obviously make products. There's the body butter and lip balm, and they're in a store. And I was talking to the store owner, and she's intentionally trying to cultivate a shop made of goods that are all made from people of color or indigenous people. And she really loves ceramics. And she was like, you would be shocked at how hard it is to find Black ceramic artists or indigenous ceramic artists. And the reality is that as you make your way down the chain, the problem starts from the point of like one person might have been able to take a ceramics class in high school or university, and those programs aren't offered at the school that are filled with primarily people of color or children or students of color. So when we start to like backtrack, why is it that there aren't enough Black people trained in this category, whatever it is, and that happens across the board. I mean, I work in Pilates, okay? There are no Black people in Pilates. I mean, there are, but like I am the only one I know in Vancouver, Black Pilates teacher. And the reality is that the barriers to enter those programs stop people at the gate before they can even receive training or before they can even receive the opportunity to pursue a career. So there is a certain amount of privilege required within the communities of color to have access to the proper training to be able to compete at the same level. So what you're uncovering here when you're trying to think of how do I make my workplace more diverse is the reality of this system of racism and how far it goes back. Like these kids are starting at a deficit. So yeah, how do we create more opportunities, more jobs? We have to start thinking about how do we repair the all the way down the line, so that you might not be able to create jobs tomorrow for a person of color, but now that you're aware, now that you're seeing that there's a lack of diversity in the industry that you work at, you can go backwards down the line and be like, oh, here's the problem. Like we need to create more programs that encourage Black folks to enter tech or video or STEM programs or anything, right? So I think it's revealing, and we want to find an immediate fix, but it's revealing is that the problem is actually, it goes quite far back. And so we have to start having conversations around, I might not be able to change my immediate surrounding and the diversity of my immediate surrounding, but maybe I can start to have conversations with people who have influence over the next cohort, the next generation coming up. And that's where it gets complicated, right? Like it's not just here and now. We're dealing with our history and bringing that forward, and we're trying to repair that while also making it better for the future. And that's a really complex thing to navigate for everybody.
That's a great answer.
Did that answer your question?
I recently started this.
Repeated, but yes, thank you.
I started a ceramics class in November, and I was actually online the other day being like, wait, where are all the Black ceramicists? Like Googling hashtag Black wheel throwing, Black potters. I'm like,
wheel throwing. Yeah, it's true though, right? And like, this is what I'm so thankful that this discussion has uncovered, because we're just used to not considering like, oh, how come there aren't any Black ceramic artists? I was watching a documentary about how all the art in North America and like, all the museums and all the reserve collection of all the art in North America, only about 2% is created by Black folks, Black artists in like historical reserves, which means like that they're being valued, that they're being stored and preserved and carried forward in the same way that like a Rembrandt or a Picasso would be. Only 2%. And think of how many people created, look at like decor trends right now. It's like boho, tribal, weaving baskets, and all of these things. Like all of that came from Indigenous folks and people of color, but they're not getting credit. Pottery Barn's getting credit. So it's like, we have to start to like really consider the things that we enjoy, the things that we love. Like what's the backstory if we kind of go back a little bit further. I think there's another question. I think leadership in every industry needs to provide extra training or opportunities for mentorship for Black folks if they feel there is no one qualified for the role. Totally. Get them to that level. Ooh, another one popped up. Instead of choosing someone else, paying extra for training, going above and beyond to make sure they're qualified. Yeah, that's a great idea. And that's something maybe, you're not comfortable bringing your Black friend to a job interview, but maybe pitching to your employer to say like, hey, do we have an initiative that can maybe support Black folks? Shanique, you mentioned like if you are a Black person in an industry, maybe you can offer mentorship to the next generation. Even if you're a white person, like if you can be conscious of the racial element, but you still feel like you have something that you can support and offer those people, then that's an option as well, right? Yeah. One more, just expanding on finding people who face that barrier to early entry in life. There is an appropriate way to signal that this position's qualifications provide room for those who had barriers getting those qualifications. Is that a question? Sorry.
Yeah.
What's that?
There is, but they said, is there an appropriate way?
Oh yeah, is there an appropriate way to signal that this position's qualifications provide room for those who had barriers getting those qualifications? I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah, like if you like, so I don't know, like if you have a job. Yeah, I think absolutely yes. Like you could have a job posting and be like, hey, if for any reason there have been like systemic barriers that have prevented you from getting all these qualifications, like send in your resume anyways, let's chat. I think that works.
Amazing.
I've seen similar stuff to that as well before.
Nice. I had another question here, and then if anybody has had any more questions come up, maybe pop them in the chat box because we're coming up on around 30 minutes here. My question for you was around Brave Spaces. I know you're a space holder, a space creator as well. Are there any tips or ideas or thoughts that you can offer around creating safer or braver spaces for people of color in various aspects, like in general, as you move through your life as a white person? How can you make sure that you're creating as much safety, bravery as you can?
Humility.
Mm.
I think that a lot of times we want to be, I think that sometimes ego can get in the way of our anti-racism work and like the pressure to be like perfect at it or good at it or smarter than someone else, but just like stripping that all away and like remembering that it's not about like virtue signaling, but it's actually like what you were saying, like we're all real actual humans deserving of like dignity and like kindness. And I think that like, I don't know, like when you can strip away that feeling of being like performative around it and just like actually meeting someone where they're at, and if you make a mistake being like, hey, yeah, I'm sorry I messed up, you know what I mean, and just like having humility around it as opposed to just being like launching into a whole speech about why you did what you did and how you won't do it again and how you read a book once. Just like be mellow.
Yeah.
And like operate like I am a real human with like you, and that this doesn't feel good. You know what I mean? Like just
Absolutely.
being like real with one another as opposed to like navigating in a world where like our egos get involved and get in the way of just being accountable to one another. So inevitable in our human lives that we will be harmed and that we will harm other people. And I think that the sooner that we just accept that and learn how to move through that, the closer that we can get to a world where people feel safe in spaces. Like just acknowledging like I have the potential to hurt someone and I have the potential to be harmed by someone. Yeah.
That's great. I love that. And then there's one more question in the chat, but I have one last question for you. And that is, what do you want to see just like dissolve away from this experience and these conversations? Like what are we over now? We can leave that. We've done that. It's not going to help us move forward. Like what needs to stop?
You know what I'm over like non-Black people telling me about a time that they stood up against racism. The other day I was with this person who was telling me about how a non-Black person about how her in-laws were arguing with her over their right to say the N-word, and that she was like, absolutely not, you're inappropriate, and like left the dinner and didn't talk to her like in-laws again. And I was like, that's great, but don't know if I needed that story. Like that's, good for you for disowning your family, but don't know if I needed that. Like I'm like, I don't know if I think we can just stop telling like Black people about times that they stood up to racism. Like let's just try, you're doing the work, do the work. You don't need to tell me you're doing it. I don't need to be reminded of situations of racism. Like just, you don't need to tell me. You don't need to tell any Black person. Just keep doing it. Keep it up. Keep it up on your own. Talk to a white friend about what you did.
It's like the validation seeking to like get your stamp of approval on.
I'm like, no, thank you.
I agree with you for sure. I think on a micro level, that to me is the same energy of like posting your good deed on social media for Black folks. Like, hey, I donated here. here's the receipt, here's the proof I'm a good person. I think that's in like the same vein. It's like this validation seeking for your good action. So I get
You've
that.
made a mistake because it's not, you're centering yourself. It's like you've already made a mistake because you've centered you. That's what we're not doing. We're not centering ourselves in this work.
Right. I agree. I also think like the most transformative changes happen in silence. And
Yeah.
so like, if you're really doing the work, you're probably not telling very many people about it. You're like embodying what you're learning. And I think that goes for your wellness practices, your spiritual practices, your anti-racism practices. You just exist in it instead of acting from it or acting from it, that intention, you know? And so usually it's like it happens more on the QT versus like needing this public validation or outpouring of support for your actions.
I like what Stephanie just said. Sonia R. Price Hebert, an anti-racism educator and Black Pilates instructor in New York, refers to perfectionism as another example of white supremacy. She says that the desire for white people who want to be perfectly anti-racist is inherently flawed and goes against the inner work of dismantling white supremacy.
I love that. Yeah. I feel like, again, it comes back to this lack of humanity. We're not robots. Like, none of us are designed to be flawless, perfect, you know. Yeah. I feel like it's just coming back to that big piece of like, we just have to remind ourselves of the humanity within each of us. And I love what you said about we can be hurt and we can hurt others. Like, that to me lands so deeply because that's a compassion practice. That's why I meditate. That's why I feel my feelings. It's to cultivate an understanding of what it's like to recognize that in myself so that I can recognize that in others. That's the whole point. And that's honestly why we're gathering here today and why I started this Kunye Community Care, because my self-practice, your self-practice, each of our individual self-practice is incomplete if we're not taking what we learn about ourselves and applying it into the world. You can be the fittest, healthiest, most toned, most woke person, but if you're not extending that to your immediate community, what really is the point? It's to feed your own ego, your own desire to feel good without consideration of other people's right to also feel good. The whole purpose of what we're doing here. And yeah, I'll give one last opportunity if anyone has questions, just for time integrity. I don't want to go too far over. But yeah, I think this was a really important conversation. And honestly, it's just the tip. Like, this is such a complex, layered topic that we need to be talking about beyond Black History Month, beyond 2021. We all now know it's all in our purview. We're all aware. And so we need to move forward with this new awareness. It's like being in a nasty relationship and learning so much about yourself from the breakup. You don't just enter another bad relationship, you do better because you know better, right?
Yep.
So yeah, I hope this inspires you to do just that. I hope you feel comfortable. If you want to reach out and you have any questions, you can definitely send them to me over at Kunye. I could forward them to Shanique. I think somebody put Shanique's handle,
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, someone did, named Caitlin.
Thank you,
What are you going
Caitlin.
to do with the rest of your birthday day? How are you celebrating?
Well, I have a lot of emails to get through. Exciting. And then I just want to relax. Enjoy some me time. I've done some self-care throughout the week. I got my nails done yesterday and a facial. So honestly, I'm going to do whatever feels good as I move throughout this weekend and just give myself space to do nothing or to do some things and like not try to put any boundaries around it and rest. Rest is like a superpower. So I really, really, really want to spend time just resting, read a book, enjoy.
Love it.
Yeah. Was there any other questions?
Just thank yous.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for your donations. We did reach our goal, and I think beyond of $2,500, which is incredible. And that's all thanks to you. So I'm just so grateful. This is honestly how I wanted to spend my birthday. This was perfect. This was enough. If I do nothing for the rest of the day, I am whole. I am complete. And I just appreciate all of you so, so much. So hopefully we can gather again soon. I want to do this on a regular basis and keep diving into conversation and witnessing each other in our experience and in our journeys of just stepping into our higher selves so that we can all collectively do better in our own ecosystems, our own bubbles, starting first with our body bubble, our body ecosystem. So with that being said, I think we're going to wrap it up. Shanique, thank you so much for that bomb playlist, for your insights, your presence, your joy. I just am so grateful for you and our friendship. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.